As they say in hockey, let's do that hockey.
Play a full 60 minutes.
Yeah, I'm just trying to keep it simple.
Get pucks deep, putting the puck deep.
Put pucks in deep.
We got to keep it simple and just get pucks going forward.
Getting into the forecheck.
We got to keep playing aggressive.
Trying to take away their time and space.
We're focused on tonight. We just got to stick to our game.
Our guest this week comes from the land of the most potential and excitement in the NHL right now with the Minnesota Wild and some freed up cap space. Joe O'Donnell, the radio voice of the Minnesota Wild. Joe, thank you for sitting down with us. How's it going this summer as it's quickly winding down for you now, about to ramp back up and be a busy man?
Yeah, all good. Thanks for having me on, guys. Our kids are back in school. Next week is rookie camp, then NHL training camp. And like just under 2 weeks from now, actually it might be, I guess about 2 weeks from now, first NHL preseason game for the Wild. So it is rapidly approaching, and look forward to this time of year.
My buddy Nico Sturm rejoining your side, a Clarkson Golden Knight alumni, and excited to watch pretty closely. Certainly have the date marked when you guys are coming to Raleigh to go out, see him play. But there was a lot of anticipation for this past NHL offseason, and maybe the hype disappointed with major UFA names, potential trades, talks about offer sheets. But what we saw was a very quiet summer, and especially after July 1st. Minnesota, one of the teams that had a lot of talk around them, cap space opening up and dollars coming off being held up. They add Tarasenko, they re-sign Nico Sturm, but also left a lot of available cap space entering training camp and maybe potential moves, but leaving the future open. Were you at all surprised with how slow the offseason went, one around the league, but maybe also around Minnesota?
Yeah, I think that a lot of people would probably tell you around the NHL that there weren't as many big splashes as maybe anticipated, but a lot of players were comfortable re-signing. With the cap going up and up the next couple of years, you kind of see that more teams have the ability to keep their star players in-house, and obviously the ability to give a player an 8-year contract versus another team trying to sign him in UFA doesn't have that ability. So it probably was a little of a buzzkill for a lot of NHL markets. I mean, a few made big splashes, but then you look at the Florida Panthers and they just try to bring the band back together. So I think depending on where you were at, maybe you had a different lens on how it played out. But from Minnesota's perspective, you're right, Casey. There was a lot of excitement going into the summer, knowing that the large share of the buyout cap hits, the dead cap money from Zach Parise and Ryan Suter were finally coming off the books. It had been talked about for years by not only Wild fans, but hockey operations staff and the GM and Bill Guerin in particular about like this, the time is coming, meaning this summer. It just didn't pan out that way, but I don't think it's a terrible thing. I really don't. Like, yes, was it a little underwhelming, but that's okay. Like, the Wild weren't just going to spend money to spend money. That's how you get yourself into trouble. Trying to make a big splash just to make a big splash, get talked about for a few weeks nationally, and then what did you actually do? So I like the flexibility that they have in season. They've got some young players coming in, competing for spots, which I think is exciting, and Wild fans should be really thrilled about to see how some of these kids pan out. The future is sort of now in a lot of respects. The last piece of business will be to try to sign Kirill Kaprizov to a long-term extension, which they have the ability and the flexibility to do. It seems like the two sides there are on the same page. It's probably just a matter of time until it gets done. But then the ability in season now to have some cap space for the first time, where an injury doesn't mean that you are, out of roster flexibility. For so many years, the Wild were right up against the cap, so call-ups and things they would do in season had to be day-to-day scrutinized and managed by the capologists, if you will, within the organization. And I think now they have the ability to make a splash should they need to in season, whether that be one more piece at the deadline or an injury or poor play, subpar play forces them to make moves. Now they've got that ability because they have the money to spend, and I think that should be exciting for Wild fans. Plus, then you have future off seasons where some of that available cap space can come into play.
There's $12.25 million already committed to that top line, with so many bigger names going on the market for next season as UFAs. Does that concern you or any of the Minnesota Wild fans regarding the number for Kaprizov to come back?
No, I don't think so. I mean, look, he's a star player. He's one of the best in the world. He's maybe the biggest star player the Wild have ever had. If he stays in Minnesota, he is going to shatter every record. It appears he's already on all over the record books after just a handful of seasons. So I think you pay him whatever you think, whatever it's going to take to get the deal done. To be honest, because of the way the salary cap's increasing, maybe 5, 6 years from now, if you're giving him 14, $15 million, that might look like somewhat of a steal compared to some of the game's top players. And that's what you're seeing around the league right now is you're seeing teams like look at the Blackhawks right now. They re-signed Frank Nazar to a deal after he played just 50 NHL games, 45 NHL games. I don't have it in front of me, but and he got over $6 million a year. We would never see that before in the NHL. So teams are kind of gambling on locking up young players early. The young players are hard pressed to turn down that type of money, especially in his case, right, where he just had one season, part of a season in the NHL. Who's going to walk away from that money? The Blackhawks are banking on 2, 3, 4 years from now, $6.5 million player of that point production capability. Like that could be a steal. So I think for the Wild, you got to look at right now what you can afford, but also the kind of in the horizon, the next couple of years with the cap continuing to go up and more revenue coming in for the NHL is like some of these deals are going to be outstanding deals for the organization, and the players still getting paid obviously early on, maybe more than what they have produced to achieve, but then moving forward, maybe it's a better deal for the team. So I think you're seeing a lot of that around the NHL as well. And so from Minnesota's perspective, easy for me to say, but I'd pay Kaprizov whatever it takes to keep him here long term. He's the franchise cornerstone. You hope he stays healthy and you build around him.
Yeah, I guess on the topic of you were talking earlier too about young guys coming up and making an impact. Another guy that I really wanted to ask about was Zeev Buim and just the way that he impressed in his 2 seasons of college hockey and then unique situation of coming in and starting your NHL career in the playoffs. I guess, what has impressed you about him and where do you kind of see him fitting in moving forward?
Well, I think you look at the analytical comps, Owen, and you see the name like Quinn Hughes, right? And sort of the trajectory that when those analytical sites project out for Buim's skill set, what he achieved in college, his age, what he's done internationally with Team USA and the World Juniors, you start to look and go, this has superstar potential, right? He's got superstar potential. Now, a lot of work's got to get put in. He's got to stay healthy. He's got to adjust to the NHL game. So I'm not saying it's a given that he's a top 2 D-man for the next decade, but over time, if he's a 50, 60-point defenseman, maybe more, runs your power play, skates well, I think it's just an absolute steal for the Wild that they were able to get this player in the first round, get him a little bit acclimated last year, as you said, in the Stanley Cup playoffs. But I think there's going to be a learning curve there. I think Wild fans saw that. Getting thrown in the Stanley Cup playoffs not easy for anybody. The very few top-end players in the world could probably absorb that type of shock from college to the NHL. We saw Cale Makar do it. Brock Faber did it for the Wild a couple years ago, but even he got a couple of regular season games. So it's not an easy spot they put him in, but I think that experience is huge. I've seen this a lot in my broadcasting career at the minor league level. Kids come out of college, they sign that PTO, the ATO, depending on the league you're in and what the player's eligibility is, and they get that little taste of what the pro level is about, whether it's the American League, the ECHL, but coming from Clarkson, Michigan State, wherever your player, Penn State, your player is coming from, Wisconsin, they get even just a few games. They see what the pro game's about. They see how pros operate, how they take care of themselves, what the travel's like, what's required of you on a game day, way different than college. So I think just getting that experience for Zeev Buim and plenty of other players in years past gives him a huge leg up going into the summer. So this summer that's now essentially expiring on us, what does he need to do? How does he get ready? Does he need more muscle mass? Does he need to get quicker? The shot lanes that were there in college on the power play weren't there in the NHL in the Stanley Cup playoffs against Vegas. in their penalty kill. So you just see those things, you get a little taste of it. And I think that was my guess, probably huge for him getting ready now for his first full NHL season. So I do expect a lot from him. But I think it's going to take a little bit of time as he continues to get more comfortable.
Taking a look at your goaltending room, everybody's beloved goaltender Flower stepping away from the game. Focusing again on the youth, have you seen much, if anything at all, from Wallstedt to kind of let you know that he's a legitimate NHL goaltender and could potentially be a number one in the future in the league?
Yeah, George, I just got to go off what I've been told, really, because we just got a little glimpse of it at the NHL level. I didn't cross paths with him in the American Hockey League. Jesper's a kid that everything I hear about his work ethic, his drive, his desire is that he wants to be, he believes he can be a number one goalie in the NHL. And that's what you want, right? He's a first round pick. He's the best wild goaltending prospect in a number of years. And he did flash at the NHL level. Now, the caveat, the teams that he beat, Chicago, San Jose, I think those are his 2 NHL wins. Maybe I missed one in there. Like, they're not world beaters, right? They're not there yet. He didn't go into Vegas and win a game. He didn't beat Winnipeg in Winnipeg. He got kind of torched in Dallas in his first NHL start, but that was a tough spot for the kid. So I think, the highs and the lows of a young goaltender are going to be against something that he'll experience, and Wild fans will have to kind of live through those growing pains. But everything I hear about his makeup, his character, his work ethic, it's A+. He's got the skills. He's got the size. He's got the pedigree. He's played on big stages before internationally for Sweden. The American Hockey League's tough, man. It's a tough league for goalies in particular. And I think he felt that. He didn't have a great season last year. I think Jesper would be the first to tell you that. It was just it didn't pan out between the injuries and the struggles. Like every good game he had, it felt like he gave up 4 the next night. And that was just something that he had to go through. Hopefully he comes out on the right side of it. He becomes better because of it, stronger because of it mentally. But yeah, it's going to be, his net essentially after Philip Gustafsson. The Wild didn't go out and sign a veteran NHL goalie to come in and compete, or a guy to take 10 or 15 starts. Like, if Gustafsson plays 60, 65 games, the other 20 games or whatever are gonna land on Wallstedt's shoulders, and I'm sure Minnesota would probably like to not have to run Gus into the ground by February or March, especially with Team Sweden and the Olympics on the horizon for Gustafsson. So it could be a long year for Philip Gustafsson, but the hope is that Wallstedt is ready. I believe the organization believes that he is ready, and that's why they didn't go out and really add a veteran-type goalie behind Philip Gustafsson. But again, Wallstedt's going to have to go out and earn it. He really is. Like this camp, it's not just, all right, you're here. He's going to have to earn his spot on the team. He's going to have to earn his ice time, and he's going to have to be ready when called upon this year.
You touched on it too a little bit earlier too, just talking about your time in the American League. But you had, part of this podcast too is we have a lot of aspiring broadcasters who tune in and like to listen. And you had quite a few stops in the minors, both in the American League and also in the ECHL. And I just, for our listeners, we did want to ask a little bit about kind of your career path and what led you to the NHL.
Well, my first job out of college was an internship with the Reading Royals. That was like 02 and 03. So somewhere those 2 seasons in there, like the 02, 03, 03, 04, maybe part of 04, 05. I got to Boise in March of 05. I can tell you that much. But the experience in Reading was great because it gave me a chance. John Curtis was the broadcaster there. He handled the radio and the PR, but like I'd go on game days and help in the press box and make sure, that things didn't fall through the cracks while he was on air, right? And then if he had a TV game, I got a chance to fill in on radio. So I got maybe 4, 6, 8, somewhere in there games over the course of a couple of seasons helping out the Royals. And in March of 05, I got a phone call from John Curtis, who I still keep in touch with this day. He's a big reason I am where I am, because even in that little bit of an internship run with him, he taught me what it was like to be in the minors, which is like, the game notes, the press releases, the game recaps, all that stuff in addition to the broadcasting. And he said that, there was going to be an opening in Boise because the broadcaster there had quit with like 15 games left in the season or 20 games left. So the Steelheads were interested. They had called the league office. The ECHL All-Star game happened to be in Reading that year in 2005. So, like, I worked that game. I helped the league folks. So when Boise was scrambling for a broadcaster, it's my understanding they called the league office. The league office is like, well, we know there's an intern in Reading who's, aspiring. And so basically just like through a couple of, I guess, what you call good recommendations and maybe a little bit of firsthand knowledge, of my desire to become a full-time broadcaster, I basically just talked to the team president in Boise, and 6 days later I was on a flight from Philly to Boise. Didn't own a suit. Didn't really know what the heck I was doing, if I'm being honest. And finished the year with Boise, like the last 15 or so games of the regular season and their playoffs. They were the defending Kelly Cup champs that year. So it was really cool to jump right into the mix. But talk about learning, on the fly, getting thrown in the fire. I got there, and I think they were wrapping up a home series against the Las Vegas Wranglers. So this is March of 2005. And
was this the year they had the fight? Was that when they were coming back against Vegas?
Oh, no, that was the year before. That was the year they won it. But there was a brawl that I was witness to in 2007, which is, you can YouTube that. It involves Jeremy Yablonsky and 2/3 of the Alaska Aces team. Matt Nickerson was in there too. It was a gong show. But anyway, I get out there to Boise, and there's a couple home games, so I was able to get settled for a couple of nights, and then the team hit the road for 7 games, 15 days, I think, 14 days. Victoria, Biloxi, Mississippi, Louisiana, and the Texas Wildcatters in Beaumont. So it was like literally, welcome to the ECHL. So finished that year with the Steelheads, did the next 3 seasons, was fortunate enough to be there when they won it again in 2007. The All-Star game was in Boise that year, so I got to call that. So it was just an unbelievable experience. Like, if it's a first-class organization, they still do a great job. So I'm sure you guys know they pack the stands. Their leadership there on the business side with their president, Eric Trapp, like, he's an unbelievable person. I still keep in touch with him. And he's another guy that, like, and this is what I will tell young broadcasters. I know I'm getting long-winded here, but, I guess you guys could figure that since I talk for a living. You got to do other things, right? You have to do other things. And so I got taught at a very young age, my first full-time job with the Steelheads at age 25, 26, like, you got to sell. You got to sell corporate. You got to sell tickets. You're going to put on the mascot suit if we tell you to. You're going to be at community events. And so when you understand that early on, and this isn't a knock on the Steelheads organization, but they weren't paying me very much. And I'm sure, many of the broadcasters that are tuned in right now can appreciate that. Like, you got to want it. And you got to do other things to earn your keep, to earn your, if you bring in revenue, I really believe it works out for everybody, right? Like, if you become more valuable to an organization because you're selling, like, it's going to be very hard for them to part ways with you or not want to pay you more, whether it's commission and sales or just your salary, because you've earned it, because you're bringing in, you've become a valuable part of that organization. So that was taught to me very early in my career. I'm so grateful for it because I carried on that approach in the American League, wearing multiple hats, the willingness to sell, and just being comfortable going out in the community, talking to groups, hosting events, emceeing events, and just trying to get creative with promotions and being in some of those think tank brainstorming sessions for marketing and game ops. And, what do you see on the road? Like, that's one thing that I again, like, maybe off the path here of your question, but like, if I'm giving life advice to a young broadcaster, part of it is like, you're on the road, dude. So when I was in Milwaukee for a game, if they ran something at intermission that I thought was cool, I'd either take a quick video on my phone or jot it down, and you go back to your staff with that. Like, they're not in Milwaukee. They don't know what they ran at the first intermission. But if the place is going crazy and there's a sponsor behind it, like, you have that sponsor in your town. If Jersey Mike's is a sponsor of their promotion in Milwaukee, guess what? There's a Jersey Mike's where you're playing hockey too. Those are things that you can take not only to your sales staff, but use internally as you go out and sell, to help your game ops, to help your promotions, to see just what other teams are doing. How are they packing it in? What are they doing for giveaway items? And stuff like that. I think not only is a fun part of the job, because you get to see different areas of the business side in pro sports, but I think it's also very valuable internally as you grow and you kind of develop yourself in hockey. Is like, what else can I do to make myself important to the organization? How else can I kind of impact things in a positive way that'll make me less expendable in an industry at times where they're trying to cut costs because that's just the way of life.
I got one on that topic too. I mean, you mentioned too just making the going from the ECHL where you're wearing a lot of hats and you're also wearing a lot of hats in the AHL. Did you feel like your role in the AHL was very similar to the ECHL, or because I imagine the staff was a little bit bigger, did it become a little bit of a different role?
It's a great question, Owen. I think it just depends really on your situation. And that's the other thing that I tend to tell young broadcasters is like the grass isn't always greener. Like just because it's the American League doesn't mean it's a better spot than the ECHL. If you're in a good town that you like living in, you're getting compensated well enough, the travel's good, the team has resources, right? They're not cheap at every turn. Those are things that you can't always predict when you go to a new organization. So I would look at ownership and leadership of a potential landing spot, right? If I was sending out demo tapes, now I'm dating myself with that use of that term, but like you guys all have YouTube links now. But when I was sending out CDs, with my air check, it was like, that wasn't always front of mind for me. It was like, got to get to the next level. What job's open? What job's open? And like, it's, looking back on it now, I landed in some really good spots. I was fortunate for that. But if it's good ownership, good leadership, a good spot to live, and they're going to take care of you, if there's resources within the organization, like those are things that would be critical to me if I was looking at a minor league hockey job. And so then the role is going to vary depending on the team. Some teams want you to do PR. Some teams just want you to sell. Some teams maybe don't want you to do either, and you're just a radio guy. That's rare, but that does happen. And when that does happen, like now you got to be considering what am I getting compensated here? What else can I do around this maybe where in the off season or otherwise, like if I'm just the radio guy and they don't have a need for me to do anything else, like what other sports am I calling? How else am I able to kind of make sure that I'm supplementing my income and taking, advantage of my skill set or whatever other resources to continue to stay busy and continue to get paid. So those are things that I think you have to consider when you're looking at jobs. And I really think every market's different. The league kind of dictates some of that stuff. There are bigger staffs usually in the American League, but I think you go market by market, you look and see like every team just runs it a little bit different. And sometimes you're asked to do social media or, like I said, the public relations, or maybe you're hired by the radio station and not the team. So it's always a little bit of a different situation. But I would just do the old pros and cons checklist if I was in that boat again and try to see like, all right, what's the best spot for me? And then you go hard after it with, your best sales pitch, your best highlight reel. And then just, when you get boots on the ground, it's about networking, trying to figure out who's who, treat everybody respectfully, work hard, and try to grow the brand of the organization the best you can with a good on-air product, but also what you're doing on the side to make sure, again, you stay valuable to that group.
With your time in both the ECHL and AHL, any memorable stories from the road that you could share with us that are not quite family friendly, you know what I mean, but you can share with us that players perhaps involved if it wouldn't be opposed to you sharing the tidbit?
I mean, dude, there's so many of them. If I'm being honest, it's kind of hard to pick, but I've seen the 17-hour travel day because of the missed flight connection or, whatever happens. I've been a part of a bus breaking down. I've been a part of, the one like COVID season in the American League when we did a little bit of traveling. I remember being in Austin, Texas, and we were like, myself and like the strength coach and one of the athletic trainers would go like pick up the meal for the team, and we were like delivering the food to the players in their hotel rooms, because again, like nobody was allowed to come out, right? Like we had to keep our distance, and like it felt like we were serving prisoners, to be honest. Like, it was mealtime. Like, just the number of stories is probably a little bit daunting for me, because it's been 20 years now that I've been, and most of it was in the minors. I wish I did a better job note taking, writing some stuff down, because they kind of blur and blend together a little bit. But from last minute player call ups to stuff I've seen on the ice, as far as, some stuff you can't make up, from coaches being ejected in game before the shootout, to just, again, the ice melting before a playoff game and having to delay and postpone. And I mean, I again, I've seen a lot. If you were like, if you gave me a little bit more of a specific window, like, hey, give me something from Boise 2006, like, then I might be able to dig one up for you better than that. But off the top of my head, there's just so many times on the bus or on a plane or in a hotel or on the road somewhere where you see some things that you really can't make up. And most of them are pretty clean and PC, but there's just a laundry list of them. So again, really hard for me to just nail down one.
When we think about the upcoming season here, and the Central probably being one of the most loaded conferences, thinking even back to last year, Nashville, the number 3 ranked team in the preseason odds, and the disaster that they had. But now you have teams like Winnipeg, who jumps up from being the 5th highest odds, dominated last year. Utah with all kinds of expectations behind them, even down to St. Louis, who was plus 2,300 to win the division last year, but showed what they could do. They've continued to progress throughout this year, and Chicago probably the only team in the Central that has a little bit of a ways to go, but you think down the line pretty soon they could be competitive. When you think in this season here, 25-26, what team could be the biggest surprise this season? And if that's going to happen, someone would have to fall out of that top group in the Winnipeg, Colorado, Dallas, Minnesota range. Where do you see it shaking out over the next season here?
I think that's what's most exciting about, the NHL and the way it's set up right now. I know some folks don't like the playoff seedings, right? They want the 1-8 and the 2-7 and all the way down the line. But the Central Division is just so difficult to predict and such a bear. Like, there are no easy nights. Even the Chicago Blackhawks and the Wild have had their number for years. I mean, I think it feels like they sweep the Blackhawks every year, knock on wood. And they're just, they're maybe one forward, one defenseman, one starting goalie away from, again, getting back to like real relevance and competing for a playoff spot. Like, they're knocking on the door. But then a team like Utah is really knocking on the door and probably kicked it in, at parts of last season. They kind of faded down the stretch there. You mentioned St. Louis. I don't think Nashville, they can't be as bad as they were last year. That caught everybody completely off guard with all the moves they had made in the previous offseason. So I guess Utah would be kind of that, like, that sexy pick that's like, all right, between the youth and the offensive skill, they've added Vitek Vanacek and net now to kind of help out with Vamelka there, take some pressure off him. They have experience on defense. Like, they'd be hard-pressed for me to say that they're not ready to take another step. But ultimately, we just know one thing. It's going to be 95 to 105 points if you want to have any shot. Like, if you don't get into that 95-point range from the Central Division, you're not getting in. Will we see both wildcard teams come from the Central again like we did last year with Minnesota and St. Louis? I think we will. Unless Vancouver or Calgary, are teams that are going to be in that 95 to 100-point range, which they were both awfully close last year. I think in the Pacific, you're looking at Vegas, you're looking at LA, and you're looking at Edmonton. And then in the Central, like you said, Dallas, Colorado, Winnipeg, something massive has got to go wrong for one of those teams not to be in it down the stretch. And so basically then it's Utah, it's St. Louis, it's Minnesota, maybe a Pacific Division team, Nashville. Like, those are a bunch of teams fighting for 2 wildcard spots on paper. A lot can change. We've seen the Wild last year when they were healthy. They were the best team in the Western Conference record-wise heading into the new year. And then the injuries took their toll, and they had to scratch and claw their way to get into the end. So really hard for me to just lay it out and predict, hey, this team's definitely going to fall out and this one's ready to jump in, because I think, Casey, you set up nicely where there's a lot of potential there to just be a bear of a division again, where, again, if you're not at 95 points by, April 2nd, 3rd, 4th, whatever, heading in that last week of the regular season, you're probably in some trouble.
Joe, we've kept you well longer than we asked for and really appreciate your time and willingness to join on. Best of luck this season. We're pulling for the Minnesota Wild. Hopefully it'll pull out your guys' way, but certainly a lot of excitement, and that'll continue to build as the month goes on here.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Anytime, let me know I can be of assistance. Good luck to you guys in your careers, and thanks for having me.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.